Night of storytelling. If you weren't sure what event you were at, just so everyone knows, all the money you have given me tonight will be going to FTAM and the Borg. The Borg is the space you are in. They are one of the only DIY all-ages venues in town that's running. FTAM is the organization I own and run and organize. So it's like this, the Milwaukee Noise Fest, and also a label that promotes a lot of local music. So, let's go ahead and get started. I have in here a hat filled with a bunch of names of people who are going to tell you stories tonight. So, go ahead and pick one out.
Sam Morningstar.
Samuel Morningstar, ladies and gentlemen.
I'm Sam. I'm an alcoholic. That's kind of what this is.
Hi, Sam.
I've been out of the country 3 times in my life. First time I went out of the country was when I was 7 years old. My parents told me we were going to Jamaica. Now, I didn't know about reggae music or Rastafarianism or ganja or anything at 7 years old. But I did know that it was in the tropics, and that meant a lot of wide sandy beaches and beautiful water and probably mostly naked girls laying around in the sand. You know, again, 7 years old. I didn't know about that, but I had those images in my head. Unfortunately, my parents, they've always been more proactive about their fun, a lot more adventurous. So I was disappointed to find out that we weren't staying in a hotel on or anywhere near the beach. We were actually staying in a private residence up in the mountains. And the couple we were staying with, they were married. It was a little tense. They acted as our cook and our maid for the week, and they fought in the middle of the night. I wasn't really into the native cuisine myself, so I didn't help the situation. Plus, you know, there were huge hairy spiders, which freaked me out. So I screamed a lot in the middle of the night. Very, very unpleasant. My most vivid memory, apart from trailing after my parents to a waterfall and skinning my hand open and little kids throwing rocks at my mom in an open market, was going to a bat cave. So we took the main road up the coast and took this dirt road up the side of a mountain through this little shanty town. There was all these tin shacks, no electricity or plumbing, people living just basic subsistence. I had no idea. Again, I was 7 years old. I thought they were just playing fort. We got up the mountain, we parked in the lot, and instantly we were approached by a guy who said, "Hey, I take you in." And then less than a minute later, another guy comes up and said, "No, this side's right, I take them in." And they get into an argument going back and forth. "No, I take, no, I." And my dad intercedes, and he says, "Okay, you can both take us in." And they're happy about that. There's a third guy that came along, and he had a celebratory spliff that they all passed around. He also had a 40-ounce bottle. It was the first time I'd ever seen one of those. I thought somebody had, peed in a wine bottle, Maybe he was going to see the doctor later, I don't know. But, I also recently had the thought it might have been a 2-man con, just to get my dad to be one. So anyway, we were all in agreement, and we headed off to the cave. Now, the thing about the cave is that it's a bat cave, and the thing about bat caves is they're full of bats. And the thing about bats is they're full of bat crap. And it doesn't stay inside them when they're in motion. Luckily, we didn't have any bats passing overhead. It wasn't that time of day, but there was plenty of evidence. The floor of the cave was actually paved with a 6-inch thick layer of bat guano and mud. And of course, we were all in open-toed shoes, apart from the guys who were barefoot. So we were just, slogging our way down this hill of slippery feces. At one point, my mom landed on her ass. We did our time in there, about 45 minutes, and came back out and washed off down in the stream as best we could. And the only memory I really have was just hundreds of thousands of little squeakings in the distance, like shoes on a basketball court. I didn't get out of the country again until I was in 7th grade. I went on a school-sponsored fishing trip up to Canada. There were 3 other 7th graders, a 6th grader, an 8th grader, and a 5th grader who was a son of one of the science teachers. There were 2 science teachers taking this up, and their 2 drinking buddies. The one who was bringing his son, the science teacher, we called him Buffalo Bill. He was a gruff, real man's man, outdoorsy type, hunter, fisher. Our permanent impression of him after that trip was, whoa, shit! And I kind of had the sense as we were going up there that it was going to be like living in Lord of the Flies. We got into Ontario and we were in his Jeep, with the canoe strapped on top, and we were going this mud path to get out to the lake. We were going to disembark and go off into the island where we were going to stay for the week. And we were going through this tall grass, and there was this deer out in front of us. And I was like, oh, that's so beautiful. This 5 or 6-year-old deer just running along through the tall grasses, and, Buffalo Bill speeds up and gets right behind us and starts blaring his horn. "Hey, you mother, get out of my way! I'm driving here, hey!" The deer's freaking out. I'm petrified in the back seat. Oh my God. I know he's a hunter. Is he going to run the whole thing down? I don't know. But the deer gets out of the way, and we make it to the lake and get the boats down and paddle out to the island. And Buffalo Bill singles me out. I'm off gathering woods, and he finds this 3-inch long beetle and drops it on my shoulder. They say they could hear my screams from both ends of the island, and it was a big island. My other major disappointment for the day was finding out that my best friend Jason was not planning on sharing a tent with me. He was going to share the 3-person tent with the other 2 7th graders, which meant that I got stuck with a 6th grader. It was this kind of Polish Quasimodo named Brian. And the 8th grader got stuck with Junior, the science teacher's kid. And I think my friend Jason actually regretted that decision after a few days, because the 2 guys he was sharing the tent with, while being 2 of the smartest guys in the school, in the city, in the state, hell, probably in the country, they had personal quirks. The first guy, Roy, he hit puberty really, really hard. I mean, he had really big pimples, like giant cysts all over his face, really wild curly hair, and kind of a bad attitude. He was moody all the time, and just acted like superior to everybody. But the most distressing thing is that he had a lot of allergies, and he would wake everyone in his tent up every day by going, The other guy was a lot easier to live with in general. He was a Sikh. His name was Aman. And because he was a Sikh, that meant that he had never had a haircut in his life. And that was kind of a shocker to find out, when you're waking up next to someone, they have 4-foot-long hair and they're whipping it in your face. So I felt kind of vindicated when Jason told me that. Now, the science teacher's kid, Junior, he latched on to me because he could tell that I was going to put up with a lot of bullying. I was intimidated by his dad. And he found out that I had seen The Princess Bride a number of times. And he made me go through the scene, the sword fighting scene, pretending to be Inigo Montoya every night, over and over again. I got really tired of that, but I wasn't going to stand up for myself. And he took liberties. Eventually, one day I was out in my canoe with Brian, and I see him coming up with Rick at the helm of his boat. And they got these, mischievous looks on their faces, and they start ramming us with their canoe. Buffalo Bill on the first day, he's like, anybody damages their boat, they're going to have to pay for it out of their own pocket. So he comes up and he's kind of doing the Nelson Muntz thing, stop hitting yourself, except what he's saying is, you're going to damage your boat, ram! You're going to damage your boat, ram! I'm like, get away from me, I don't want to damage his boat. I'm trying to push it away with the oar, and that's not working. So I pull the oar out of the water and I smack him over the head. Instantly, and they go off around the bend of the island, and I'm ready to crap my pants. Oh God, this is it. They're going to make my life hell for the rest of this week. And sure enough, 5 minutes later, here comes Buffalo Bill in his motorboat. Of course, he has a motorboat. All the kids have canoes. And he's got the other science teacher in the boat with him, and they're getting closer and closer. And I'm trying to read his face from a distance. It's kind of hard. He's like red-faced, but he's always red-faced. And I can't tell if it's twisted in rage. At this point in my life, looking back, I'd say that it was like a wry or an ironic expression. He got up close, about 20 feet away, and he said, let's try to keep the oars in the water. And off he went again. I didn't say anything else about it. I think he knew his son was a brat. And I didn't have any problems with either of them for the rest of the week. The only problems I had were freezing my nuts off and really missing being around girls and missing being alone after being around girls afterwards, too. Now, being a 12-year-old. At the end of the week, I was starting to eye up my friend Jason, and that's when I knew I had it. So we headed back down to Wisconsin. We were parked out in Buffalo Bill's yard and waiting for our parents to show up, and all of a sudden Brian Quasimodo decides to have it out with me, and he tackles me on the lawn, and he's on top of me just holding me down saying, who's laughing now? And I have no idea what he's talking about. Who's laughing now, huh? Who's laughing now? And easily enough I roll him over, and he's pinned down saying, who's laughing now? Who's laughing now? What are you talking about? The only one who was laughing was Rick, the 8th grader. He was standing there laughing at our little sissy fight. But, I guess he figured I paid my dues because he made it easier for me when I got into high school. And the third time I came out of the country was when I was going to school down in Tucson, ostensibly for anthropology and French literature, but actually expending most of my energies into extracurricular activities and altered states of consciousness. In one such sojourn, I went over to my friend's dormitory, and everybody was already outside, and I said, hey, what's going on? I said, hey, we're going down to Nogales. I said, cool, call me in. See, Nogales, it's a border town. There's an American side and there's a Mexican side. You can go down there as an 18-year-old American, if you have a passport, cross over, drink legally in Mexico, and then come back. Only the problem was they were taking 3 cars and all the seats were full. So someone, I can't remember whose idea it was, said, hey, you could ride in Melinda's trunk. So I said, great, and I went to Mexico in the trunk of a car. There were actually, 2 border checkpoints. There's the one that you drive through, and they had to shut me up for that one. I was screaming along to Led Zeppelin that was playing on the radio. And then the actual border where you just cross through a turnstile and flash your passport. We parked in a fast food restaurant on the American side and crossed over the border. And we went into the bar, and I learned a minimal amount of Spanish, 6 cervezas, 4 tequilas, 2 margaritas, por favor. It was also the first time I ever saw a trough urinal. And I stole a few beers because actually I am an alcoholic. We stayed there till bar closed, and we were stumbling by the time we got back across the border, having a little difficulty with the turnstiles. We got back into the parking lot, and I knew that Melinda, my driver, was drunk because while everybody was doing their little pit stop thing, she walked over to this grass island by the menu where you order for the fast food restaurant, and I guess she thought she was behind some bushes. She just dropped her trousers and squatted there. And I watched this for a couple seconds, sitting up in the trunk, and I say, Melinda, get in the car and let's get out of here. And she says, I'm not getting in the trunk with you, I'm driving. All right, whatever. So they closed me up, and I passed out pretty quickly. And I guess I was still asleep when they got back to Tucson, and they forgot about me. And they left me in the trunk of the car. I had no idea, I was asleep. I guess Shannon, Melinda's boyfriend, he's up by his dorm room, and all of a sudden he stops in his tracks and goes, we forgot about Sam. So they come back down. It's about 7 o'clock in the morning by now. They open the trunk, and I'm like, hey, good morning. Are we back? They didn't have to tell me they forgot about me, but they did tell me, and I appreciate that. And I'm glad they remembered me, too, because if they had left me there until noon when I was passed out drunk in the desert heat and, this steel box, I would have been cooked alive. I wouldn't be here now. Well, that's all I have to say about being out of the country, and if I was going to summarize, I'd say, don't drink and drive. Keep your oars in the water and watch out for bad shit because that stuff is slippery.
Been out of order, Sam, but do you want to introduce yourself, tell people who you are? Forgot to do that.
I'm Sam.
Stand up.
There you go. What do you do? Talk about yourself for a
I'm
second.
Sam Morningstar, voice actor, aspiring musician, and current co-producer on a movie in production.
Excellent.